Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis, the Praise of Folly podcast. Today is the last episode in our series, Wall Street and FDR. Okay, 8. For the protection of employees, the following plan shall be adopted by all of these companies. A Workmen's Compensation Act, which is part of the legislation necessary under this plan, shall after careful study be modeled after the best features of the laws which have been enacted by the several states. B. Life and disability insurance. All employees of companies included in this plan may, after 2 years' service with such companies, shall be, for the expiration of 5 years of service, be covered by life and disability insurance. 1. The form of policy shall be determined by the association of which the company is a member and approved by the federal supervisory body. The policy will belong to the employee and may be retained by him and kept in full force when he changes his employment or otherwise discontinues particular services outlined later. 2. The face value of a policy shall be for an amount approximately equal to 1 year's pay, but not more than $5,000, with the exception that the employee may, if he desires, increase at his own cost the amount of insurance carried, subject to the approval of the Board of Administrators later defined. The cost of this life and disability insurance shall be paid one half by the employee and one half by the company for which he works. With the following exception, the company's cost shall be determined on the basis of premiums at actual age of employees less than 35 years old and on the basis of 35 years of age for all employees 35 or over, and shall be a face value of approximately one half a year's pay, but limited to a maximum premium of $2,500 of insurance. An employee taking out insurance at age 35 or over will pay the excess premium over the amount based upon age 35. This will remove the necessity for restriction against engaging employees or transferring them from one company to another because of advanced age, as it will place no undue burden on high premiums upon the company. 4. The life and disability insurance may be carried by a life insurance company selected by the trade association and approved by the federal supervisory body, or may be carried by a company organized by the trade association and approved by the federal supervisory body, or a single company may be formed to serve all associations. 5. The administration of the insurance plan for each company shall be under the Board of Directors of Administrators. The administration of the insurance plan for each company shall be under the board of direction of a board of administrators consisting of representatives, one half elected by the employee members. The power and duties of the board for each company will be able to formulate general rules relating to the eligibility of employees, etc. But such rules shall be in consonance with the general plan laid down by the General Board of Administration of the trade association of which the company is a member and approved by the federal supervisory body. 6. Provision for the continuation of a policy after an employee leaves one company and goes to another in the same association, or goes to a company in another trade association. Continuance of the policy after retirement on pension. Provisions with regard to beneficiaries' total or partial disability. Method of payment of premiums by payroll, deductions, or otherwise, weekly, monthly, or annually, shall be embodied in the plan formulated by the trade association with the approval of the federal supervisory body. 7. If an employee leaves a company to go with one which he is not a member of the trade association, if he engages in business for himself, or if he withdraws from industrial or commercial occupation, he may elect to retain the portion of the policy for which he has paid in whole or in part, by the continued payment of the proportional full premium costs, or he may receive a paid-up policy or be paid the cash surrender value for the part which he has been paying the premiums. The cash surrender value of that portion of the policy paid for by the company will be paid to the company which paid the premiums. C. Pensions. All employees of companies included in this plan shall be covered by old age pension plans, which will be adopted by the trade associations and approved by the federal supervisory body. principal provisions will be as follows. 1. All employees may, after 2 years of service with the company coming within the scope of this plan, and shall before the expiration of 5 years of service be covered by the old age pension plan. All employees after 2 years service may, and after 5 years service, shall be required to put aside a premium of 1% of earnings, but not more than $50 per year for the pension fund. The employee may, if he desires, put aside a larger amount, subject to the approval of the Board of Administrators. 3. The company shall be required to put aside an amount equal to the minimum stated above, namely 1% of earnings of employees, but not more than $50 per year per employee. 4. The above minimum percentage shall be the same for all employees who are less than 35 years of age when payments begin, and the minimum percentage for those employees shall remain the same thereafter. The percentage to be set aside by employees coming into the pension plan at 35 years of age or over shall be so determined that it will provide a retiring allowance at age 70, the same as though they had begun 1% payments at the age of 35. These provisions enabled employees to go from one company to another in the same association or to different associations at any age with provision for retiring allowances, which will be not less than the minimum rate of an employee who entered the pension plan at 35. 5. The amount set aside by the employee and the company with the interest compounded semi-annually at 5% until retirement at age 70 for a typical average employee would provide an annuity of approximately 1/2 pay. 6. The administration of the pension plan for each company shall be under the direction of a board of administrators consisting of representatives, 1/2 appointed by the management and 1/2 elected by the employee members. The powers and duties of the board for each company will be to formulate general rules relating to eligibility of employees, conditions of retirement, etc. But such rules shall be in consonance with the general plan laid down by the General Board of Administration of the Trade Association, of which the company is a member and approved by the federal supervisory body. 7. The amounts collected from the employees in the company shall be placed with the pension trust organized by the association, the management of which shall be under the direction of the General Board of Administration referred to hereafter. In no case shall such funds be left under the control of an individual company. 8. The pension trust shall invest all funds and place them to the credit of the individual employees, including the income earned by the trust. If an employee goes from one company to another in the same association, the funds accumulated to his credit shall be continued to his credit with proper record of transfer. If an employee goes to a company in another association, the funds accumulated to his credit shall be transferred to his credit in the pension trust of the association to which he goes. If an employee goes to a company which does not come under these provisions, of which is not a member of a trade association, goes into business for himself, or withdraws from an industrial or commercial occupation, the amount of his payments plus the interest of the average rate earned by the fund shall be given to him. If an employee dies before reaching retirement age, his beneficiary will receive the amount of his payments plus the interest at the average rate earned by the funds. When an employee reaches retirement age, the entire amount accumulated to his credit, including his own payments and those of the company, plus accumulated interest, will be given to him in the form of an annuity. If an employee goes to a company which does not come under the provision or which is not a member of the trade association, goes into business for himself, or withdraws from industrial or commercial occupation, he may elect to let the amount to his credit, namely his own payment, plus those of the company and the accumulated interest, remain with the pension trust for transfer, if he should return to employ of any company coming within the provisions of this plan. If he does not return to the employee of a company coming under these provisions, he may at any time thereafter withdraw the amount of his own payments plus interest at the average rate earned by the funds up to that time. Company contributions and accumulated interest credit to employees who die or for reasons indicated above receive or withdraw their own contributions and interest shall be returned to the employer or employees who made the contributions. 9. The rules governing the payment of pensions on retirement and all other rules governing its countenance shall be made by the trade association, approved by the federal supervisory body, and observed by the General Board of Administration and the Board of Administration of the member companies. D. Unemployment insurance. All employees on piecework, hourly work daily, weekly, or monthly work with a normal pay of $5,000 per year or less, approximately $996.15 per week, should be covered by unemployment insurance. All such employees may, after 2 years of service with the company, coming within the provision of this plan, and shall, after 5 years of service, be required to put aside a minimum of 1% of earnings, but not more than $50 per year for an unemployment insurance fund. 2. The company shall be required to put aside an amount equal to that put aside by the employees as said above, namely 1% of earnings of each employee, but not more than $50 per year for each such employee. 3. If a company regularizes and guarantees employment for at least 50% of the normal wage paid each year to such employees, the company assessment for employees covered by such guarantee need not be made, but the employees will pay in a minimum of 1% of earnings, but not more than $50 per year, into a special fund for their own benefit. If such an employee leaves the company, dies, or retires on pension, the amount to his credit in the special fund plus interest at the average rate earned by the special fund shall be given to him or to his beneficiaries or added to his pension. 4. If a company so plans its work that it is able to reduce unemployment when the amount of such company's credit in the normal unemployment fund is equal to but not less than 5% of the normal annual earnings of the employees covered, the company may cease making payment to the fund. Employees' payment will continue. The company will resume payments when its credit in the normal unemployment fund falls below 5% of normal annual earnings of the employees covered. 5. When the weekly payments made for the fund for unemployment benefits amount to 2% or more of the average weekly earnings of participating employees, the company shall declare an unemployment emergency, and normal payments by employees in the company shall cease. Therefore, all employees of the company, including the highest officers receiving 50% or more of the average full-time earnings, shall pay 1% of their current earnings to the unemployment fund. A similar amount shall be paid into the fund by the company. The unemployment emergency shall continue until normal conditions are restored, which shall be determined by the Board of Administrators of each company. Thereupon, normal payments will be resumed. 6. The main provisions for the distribution of the fund shall follow along these lines, unless modified by the Board of Administration as set forth in Section D, paragraph 7 hereof. A certain small percentage of the normal payments of employees and the company may be considered as available for helping participating employees in need. A larger percentage of such normal payments may be considered as available for loans to participating employees in amounts not exceeding $200 each, with or without interest as may be determined by the board. The balance of the fund shall be available for unemployment payments. Unemployment payments shall begin after the first 2 weeks of unemployment and shall amount to approximately 50% of the participating employee's average weekly or monthly earnings for full-time, but in no case more than $20 per week. Such payments to individual employees shall continue for no longer than 10 weeks in any 12 consecutive months, unless extended by the board. When a participating employee is working part-time because of lack of work and receiving less than 50% of his average weekly or monthly earnings for full-time, he shall be eligible for payments to be made from the fund, amounting to the difference between the amount he is receiving as wages from the company and the maximum he may be entitled to as outlined above. 7. The custody and investment of funds and administration of the unemployment insurance plan for each company shall be under the direction of a board of administrators consisting of representatives, one half appointed by the management and one half elected by the employee members. The power and duties of the board shall be to formulate general rules relating to eligibility of employees, the waiting period before benefits are paid, amounts of benefits and how long they shall continue in any year, whether loans shall be made in time of unemployment or need, whether a portion of the fund shall be placed at the disposal of the board for relief from need arising from causes other than unemployment, etc. But Such rule shall be in consonance with the general plan laid down by the General Board of Administration of the trade association of which the company is a member and approved by the federal supervisory body. 8. If an employee leaves the company and goes to work for another company coming within the provisions of the plan, the proportionate amount remaining of his normal contributions plus interest at the average rate earned by the fund shall be transferred to such company and to his credit. If he leaves for other reasons, dies, or retires on pension, the proportionate amount remaining of his normal payment plus interest at the average rate earned by the fund shall be given to him or to his beneficiary or added to his pension. When such employee's credit is transferred to another company or paid to the employee or to his beneficiary under this provision, an equal amount shall be paid to the cooperating company. General administration. Each trade association will form a general board of administration, which shall consist of 9 members, 3 to be elected or appointed by the association, 3 to be elected by the employees of the member companies, and 3 representing the public to be appointed by the federal supervisory body. The members of the general board, except employee representatives, shall serve without compensation. The employee representatives shall be paid their regular rates for pay for time devoted to the board work, and all members shall be paid traveling expenses, all of which shall be borne by the trade association. The powers and duties of this general board shall be to interpret the life and disability insurance, pension, and unemployment insurance plans adopted by the trade association and approved by the federal supervisory body, supervise the individual company board of administration, form and direct a pension trust for the custody, investment, and disbursements of the pension funds, and in general supervise and direct all activities connected with life and disability insurance, pension, and unemployment insurance plans. Appendix B. Sponsors of plans presented for economic planning in the United States in April 1932. American Engineering Council, New York. American Federation of Labor, Washington. Associated General Contractors, Washington. Charles A. Beard, New Milford Kahn. Ralph Borsatti, author and economist, New York. Chamber of Commerce of the United States, Washington. Stuart Chase, author and economist, Labor Bureau, New York. Wallace B. Donham, Dean, Harvard School of Business. Fraternal Order of Eagles, Ludlow Bill. J. Franklin, author, The Forum. Guy Greer, economist, The Outlook. Otto Kahn, banker, New York. Senator Robert M. La Follette, U.S. Senate. Louis L. Lorwin, economist, Brookings Institute, Washington. Paul M. Mazur, investment banker, New York. Just as a side, Paul Mazur is the author of American Prosperity, a book that I make a lot of references to, so that's interesting. McGraw-Hill Publishing Co., New York. New England Council, Boston. Progressive Conference, La Follette Bill. P. Redmont, economist, Schendectay, New York. Summer Schlichter, economist and author, Madison, Wisconsin. George Sewell, editor of the New Republic. C.R. Stevenson of Stevenson, Jordan, and Harrison, New York. Gerard Swoop, President, General Electric Co. Wisconsin Regional Plan. State Legislator, Madison, Wisconsin. National Civic Federation, New York. All right, that is all of Wall Street and FDR. So I think one thing I'll do is I'll briefly summarize the big ideas that Sutton has put out here. First of all, he's arguing that FDR himself was not actually an opponent to this business interest, contrary to even now, because he wrote this in 1976, but even in our own day, Roosevelt has this aura, a halo around him. And when you actually think about this, he's writing this 30 years after Roosevelt died and 30 years after World War II was over. I mean, this is kind of a gutsy thing to do because FDR, especially in the 70s, was considered this hallowed figure. Being a member of an older, family establishment with connections to money, connections that are often overlooked, I find this to be very interesting, right? Because the left in the prior to 2012, where they went woke, they were like, well, look, follow the money. That's how you know who's controlling who. And it is interesting that official biographers up to that point of Roosevelt did not really consider Roosevelt's financial connections. And he goes into the whole donor list for the Democratic Convention 1932, which is huge. And that's interesting. And then from there, he concludes that because Herbert Hoover rejected the swoop plan because he claimed it was fascism, that he was not given the green light and support by Wall Street. I think that's fairly well documented. He gave a lot of evidence that seemed to back this up. He then goes into the fact that the elites tried to justify this consolidation and cartelization of the economy in terms of the country as a whole and specifically the needs of the workers. So Sutton says that they padded it out with like a workers' benefits in order for people to get on board with this. That seems quite plausible. The chapter, I forget which one it was, where we read about all of these, socially minded, conscious, socially conscious businessmen sounded a lot like the people today who are pushing for, all these modern agendas, what stakeholder capitalism they call it now. Sounded very much like that, what we were reading from the 20s and 30s. The Butler Commission was the Butler Committee was interesting because I've known about the quote plot to overthrow Roosevelt, or the plot to have a Wall Street dictatorship. Now, a lot of that came from left-wing sources, so I was a bit skeptical, and they didn't really seem to have a lot of good evidence to back it up. Though I do trust Butler somewhat because he wrote War is a Racket, and that was one of the best anti-war tracts written in America. So I don't think he'd completely make it up. But what Sutton points out is that there was a lot of irregularities in how it was handled, which at the very least should cause us to scratch our heads. Furthermore, the fact that this hasn't been investigated in any great detail since then, and that certain parts of the committee sessions are still not available, should also be suspicious. But it's kind of strange, though, right? Because if FDR was already playing ball with them, accepting the swoop plan, did they really need a dictatorship? Like, I guess it was like a contingency plan. I mean, if we take the testimony of Butler and some of the other guys at face value, we could interpret it as a contingency plan. Like, well, okay, if Roosevelt doesn't play ball, because there was that one guy that did testify who said, Butler didn't remember the conversation correctly. But in the Butler account of the conversation, he said, well, Roosevelt better play ball with us or he'll be pushed to the back. So it's possible a contingency plan that was unnecessary. That's one possible interpretation, but again, there isn't a lot there. And so the overall argument here is that FDR was, his campaign was financed by Wall Street in 1932 at the expense of Herbert Hoover in order to get the swoop plan passed, in order to cartelize the U.S. economy. That seems to be his claim here. And that far from being, quote, anti-business or anti-finance, FDR was pro-business, pro-finance. It's kind of interesting because that's also a claim made by the populist candidate at the time from Louisiana, the Kingfish. He was saying the same thing. It's like Roosevelt should just let the Great Depression keep going to create a crisis of capitalism. And so I don't know about that. I mean, it probably would have made things worse from the point of view of someone who wants to push this. Huey Long was like, just let it get worse so that we can, have a... I mean, he's a populist, so I don't know if he wants like a communist-style revolution. That's unlikely because, again, Long was a populist. But I think one of the things that I think hampers the analysis here for Sutton is that he has a basically libertarian perspective. He mentioned Rothbard, he mentioned Mises, he mentioned Kolko, who's a Marxist, of course. But the idea being that these Wall Street guys that are putting their thumb on the scales are just ignoring the immutable laws of the market. And if we just return to that, it would all be great. Of course, that's sort of what Sutton writes in the introduction to Frederick C. Howe's Confessions of a Monopolist. Again, the whole game is rigged. So even if you win at the bottom, you're still playing a rigged game. And of course, they're holding the thumbs on the scale for everybody beneath them. And furthermore, from the point of view of the narrative that FDR was confronting capital. The fact that you had a strength in unions, you had more worker rights than before, especially with the Wagner Act, where he got rid of private security, so no more Pinkertons and Baldwin Felt agents shooting you up, and more or less ended the prison camp scenarios of like the factory towns, like in West Virginia, especially in Colorado. That seems to be a big win for any sort of labor-minded group. You could argue, well, look, right, this is how you play politics in Washington. And Roosevelt was just playing that game in order to get some tangible good out of it. I think the way you look at it is certainly cartelizing the economy benefits Wall Street, benefits those few interests at the top. But I think that there were, within the deep state, there were concerns that labor conditions were so bad that if nothing was done, it would lead to a revolution in the United States. And I think FDR was their man to put this plan into execution so that you could sort of nip any sort of revolutionary movement in the bud. And so they saw that, well, if we don't address things, it's going to get real bad. And we'd already seen what happened in Europe, in Russia and Germany, when the economic crisis got bad. And by sort of like heading it off with, as you said, the carrot of the welfare benefits, you could sort of avoid all this. Because once you get into a revolutionary moment like that, it's difficult to control everything to make sure you end up on top at the end. So it's interesting. I don't know if this is as valuable as the Bolsheviks one, because, well, I guess the important point is he mentioned also persons from Wall Street who had been affiliated in the earlier Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution work, also supporting Roosevelt, demonstrating the fact that these men are more than willing to support any side that they think they can get an advantage from, whether it's Lenin and the Bolsheviks or FDR, and our next book, Hitler. So it's useful in that sense. It's useful in showing that, look, Wall Street capture has existed for a long time. They'll support whoever they think can benefit them in the short run. And there's corporate capture of the Democratic Party based on donors. So I think ultimately any flaws that I think this work has is partly due to his priors, his sort of like business conservative libertarian priors, because I think they just fail to accurately account for some of these issues. Furthermore, too, while you might argue it's unfair that these cartels have consolidated the economy, in a modern industrial society, the kinds of, quote, market shocks that you would have seen in the 19th century would be fatal. Going back to Veblen and the machine process can't be disrupted. Ideally, it's modified interstitially by technicians who want to make tweaks and changes, but you can't fundamentally disrupt it, because if you fundamentally disrupt it, it breaks down. And as we become more and more dependent on industrial processes, it behooves those who are, controlling those industrial processes to consolidate, because one, it's more efficient, and then two, it's easier for the government to bail out a consolidated consortium. And if it's consolidated and it's bailed out, therefore you don't have these shocks that would disrupt the machine process. And it's this lack of a higher... Now, granted, very few people in the 70s, you had some leftists at this point who we were talking about environmental issues and the effects of technology. I mean, at this point, Ellul had already written his book on technique, but most people didn't know about Ellul. I only heard about Ellul because I was, sort of spending some time in the Christian anarchist circle. And he is considered a Christian anarchist. But then he has this broader technology critique. So again, I would say that Sutton is good as a researcher and as a historian. I think he's a little less good when it comes to tying this all together to explain it, because there's certain elements his own priors prevent him from seeing. So that's sort of what I think about this particular work. Though I would say that Sutton has sort of got me to think about the Butler affair again, maybe treat it more seriously. A lot of all the irregularities he discussed, I think, were very interesting, and that They really don't get covered much. The other thing that's interesting about Sutton is a lot of these talking points, the Butler affair and then Wall Street and Hitler, were like classic anti-globalist left talking points. I can only assume they got them from Sutton. Well, the Butler affair, he mentioned an investigative journalist who himself was a communist who was reporting on it. So there was within the radical left a discussion about that. But I don't know of anybody at the time writing about the Wall Street and Hitler. And of course, Wall Street and the Bolsheviks is completely ignored except by Richard Pipes, who makes reference to that, the more official work, the technical transfers, as well as Brzezinski and his Between Two Ages. So there's that. We have in the chat, everyone, Manolan, GF, and JLM. Hello. Manolan, the free market will free everyone. Perhaps not as valuable, but still very interesting. Yeah, I mean, again, Sutton's a very interesting, informative writer. I just think this work, which first time I read, so everybody watching it with me, this is the first time, was not quite as useful as Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Now, it might be with the third installment of the Wall Street trilogy, the Wall Street and Hitler, that he'll have this like sum total analysis that's the result of all three books, where each link makes a progressively stronger case. And when he makes that full case, that's an absolute possibility. And given Sutton's erudition, I wouldn't put it past him. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week for the first episode of Wall Street and Hitler. This is Todd Lewis, the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.